Hello pizza fans! Today I'm going to show you how to turn all of these ingredients into one of my favorite pizzas. Let me run you through the list of everything we have here so you know what to pick up at the store if you want to try and replicate this at home. You are going to need at a minimum I think a quarter pound of Italian sausage. I use a little bit of parsley, a little bit of basil, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of pepper for seasoning. One green pepper, one red pepper, one red onion, one white onion, one shallot, one clove of garlic, at least one pizza crust, at least 6 ounces of cheese, at least one container of pizza sauce, and I think that's about it. So, I'm going to break this down step by step, show you how to do each and every part one by one. I suggest that you start with the garlic. That's probably going to take the longest, and it's the thing that we do the most different things with. So I will start with the garlic as well. I am also going to start the sausage simmering because that takes a little while too, and it's the only thing I really have to pre-cook. So we're going to start with garlic and sausage. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, I'm going to try and do this kind of sequentially. So step one is the garlic. If you've never done garlic yourself, there's a first time for everybody. There was a first time for me. It was annoying because I didn't have any instructions, so that's kind of why I'm doing this video. Anyway, basically just peel off all this papery stuff on top. Like that. I'm not going to make you watch each and every one of these, don't worry. But that's it. I mean, you don't have to be super careful with it. The little bulbs are, if it's a decent piece of garlic, the little bulbs are pretty tough. So this is what you're hoping to get out of there. These little bulbs, that's what's hiding all the flavor. And once you get most of the paper off of one of those, you want to crack this outer shell. There's a number of ways to do that. I like to just kind of crunch it with my thumbs like that, and that usually breaks apart the shell. And then the rest of it, I just peel off. So there's an outer layer of papery stuff. You break through that to get to these little bulbs, and then they each have their little shells, kinda. And you gotta break through that. So this, without all the paper, is what we're looking to get. Let me see if I can focus on that a little bit better. This is the before, and this is the after. And the thing I just did, you want to repeat until you have no more of the garbage and only things that look like this. We'll come back when I'm actually done with that. Alright, now that we've peeled the garlic, we have a big pile of garbage that we're going to throw away, and a small pile of useful things that we will take and make into our pizza. I'm going to take the biggest bulbs, the best looking ones, and roast them. I'm going to roast them at about 500 degrees until just a little bit of the outsides turn black. Not all the way, just like a spot. You don't want the whole thing to turn black, that's unhealthy. But you want to make sure they're nice and roasted. The smaller ones I'm going to take into my garlic press, and I'm going to squish them. If you don't have a garlic press, you can just kind of crunch them up with a fork. It'll do nearly as good of a job, but if you have a garlic press, use it, it'll help. And I'm going to put that in some olive oil and simmer it. So that's next. Alright, so we put our garlic in the oven at 500 degrees. It took about 10 minutes, and these are the results. They are fresh out of the oven, and so actually a little too hot to touch. Let me bring the paper up to the camera. This is more or less what they ought to look like. And later on, I'm going to cut those up one by one and put them into the sauce of the pizza, but let me show you right now an example with one. I think one might be cool enough. Yeah, basically. So you just take a knife. You can cut them almost any direction you want to, but with these nice flat ones, I like to try and keep some of that flatness intact. Something like that. Almost like a fillet. If it's a really thin one, you might only get 2 little slices out of it. That's basically it. I just cut it so that it's nice and thin, and then I put that right on the pizza sauce. I'll cut up all of these off screen. The next thing you need to see, though, is this. This is a double boiler with just a little bit of olive oil in it. You really don't need much, just enough to submerge the little bits of garlic. And I'm going to take my garlic press, which is a device that looks like this if you haven't used one before. Don't be intimidated. Again, there's a first time for everything, and I'd never used a garlic press before I started making pizzas this way, so you can learn the same way that I did. If you've used one before, then just kind of ignore everything I just said. You just put a piece of garlic into the press like that. You can put more than one if you want. If you have room, I'm just going to show you an example. Then you just squish it. And that's all there is to it. Squish it, and the bits come out the bottom. I'm going to put a little bit more in. And that's it, and you just let those bits fall into the pan, and then you simmer this. And when I actually get that simmering, I will show you what that looks like. Right, so when you have your garlic simmering in your olive oil, it should look something like this. You want to heat it to just enough to where you see these little bubbles coming out of the garlic. You don't want to heat it so much until it turns black or brown or crispy or anything like that. That's way too much. This is the limit. Set it here for just a couple of minutes and then take it off. You don't need to cook the garlic. You're not eating this garlic. All you're doing with this garlic is infusing its wonderful flavor. Supposed to be my fingers, too close to the camera. Infusing its wonderful flavor into the olive oil, and then you're throwing it away. So we're going to dip a brush in this later. We're going to brush it onto our crust to make it taste delicious. That's all we're doing with it, so don't worry about the garlic. This is as much as you need to do. I can't emphasize that enough. I have burnt so much garlic in these dishes so many times. It's also worth noting that's why I use a double boiler. You don't have to use a double boiler. You can use a regular pan if you watch it and are very responsible. I am not that responsible, and I will walk away and forget about stuff, and a double boiler is way more forgiving. So that is why I use that. But this is pretty much all you need to do. We're going to move on next and brown some sausage. And I just put that sausage from before into a little frying pan, and I'm going to turn it on, and we are going to cook it. I'll show you what it looks like after it's been nicely browned, just in case that's something you've never done before. After a few minutes of cooking, it'll vary from oven to oven or from stovetop to stovetop. It should look something like this. You don't really need to get it any browner than this. You just want to make sure that there's no pink in there, and then you want to drain out all of this grease, and you'll have a nice big pile of crumbly meat that you can put on your pizza later. Alright, at this point you should have a plate of sausage that looks a little something like this. We can set that aside for now and move on to the vegetables. You can chop these by hand, but I highly recommend investing in a mandolin slicer. It will save your fingers, it will save you time, it will save all sorts of awesome things. Probably won't save children from a burning building, but it will do everything short of that. I'm going to show you real quick, if you haven't done this before, just kind of the basics of what you need to know. And it's really basic, that's why I love it. This is a piece of vegetable, it's a pepper that I have washed. I cut it in half. Should use a cutting board, not a plate, but these are old plates anyway, so they're not getting damaged. Alright, that's all you need to do is cut it in half, plunk it on here. Here's your mandolin slicer hand finger protector. This little thing pops up and down. If you got a good model, that's what they'll do, is that they will automatically force the food down as you go. And then you just put it down like that and run it across. If you care about not making a mess, you'll want to take out the little pips first, but I don't really care. Alright, and in just that short amount of time, I did virtually the entire pepper. And again, you can clean out these pips before if you want to, or after. Doesn't really matter. It's kind of more up to your preference. I think it's easier to do it this way because I just break off the parts that I want. And you repeat that for all of these things. I will show you how to cut an onion really quickly. Let me just finish up with this. Alright, when you're done chopping, you should have a plate of vegetables that looks something like this. I adjusted the width on my mandolin slicer, so I have some that are paper thin, some that are wafer thin, some that are kind of chunky. Just because I like a little bit of variety. You can use one width consistently throughout yours. I do mostly really thin because I make really thin pizzas, and I find that works best for me. But if you want to make like a deeper dish pizza or a regular width pizza, maybe some slightly chunkier vegetables will survive better in your oven if you're cooking it for longer than I am. But anyway, this is how I do it. Now moving on, I'm going to show you what to do with these onions and this shallot. Basically, this is going to be a combination of the last couple of things we did with vegetables. We're going to peel the skin off of this, and hold on, let me get a trash bag handy because this stuff is going to go everywhere. Alright. And I took off a little too much, but it doesn't really matter. Just want to peel down into this, take off a layer or two of the skin. Till you see something nice and shiny underneath. And really the main reason why I do this is cleanliness, because the stuff on the outside has been touched by other people at the grocery store. Stuff on the inside, not so much. Alright, so you take this, chop it in half. Again, I should be using a cutting board, but these are old dishes, so I don't care. And be careful with your fingers, especially if you don't have the world's sharpest knife, because onions like to skid out from underneath you. Alright. And that is half an onion. Now, same treatment with the mandolin slicer. I like my onions really thin, so I'm giving this a very thin setting. Crunch it down. Industrial magic. And boom. That's one. Let's go ahead and do the other one just to show you how fast you can do a whole onion. And that is it. That is a whole chopped onion. Very fast and very fine. You can see light through this. It's okay. You need a light source behind here for that effect to actually work, but you get the idea. So you repeat that with these two things, and then we will move on. Okay, if you've been following along, you should have 2 plates of vegetables that look something like this. Now comes the really fun part, putting this all together on an actual pizza, and then the really fun part, eating it. Hold on, and I will come back and we will bring back all of these ingredients that we've been working with together and unify them. So the first step in actually making the pizza is going to be to take the crust out of the little bag it came in, because we're not hand tossing this ourselves. We're not madmen, although hand tossing is fun. It takes a whole day to let that dough rise, and I learned to just buy my crust at the store. So this came right out of a package. I am going to start by putting some olive oil on the back. Just brushing it on there. This is the olive oil that we prepared earlier. And you don't have to be fancy about it. You don't have to be careful. You just brush it on, because just trying to get garlic flavored olive oil on there. And once you have a nice amount on the back, you flip it over and you put just a little bit around the edge of the crust like that. You don't have to use a ruler, be too very thoughtful about it. you just want to get enough on there so that when you eat the crust later, you have a nice little garlicky infused bite at the end. Alright, so that's the first step. Now we're going to move on to the next step. Alright, the next step is pretty straightforward. It is applying the sauce. This little jar here probably has twice as much sauce as I need. We'll find out together. I haven't bought this particular size jar before, but it looks like twice as much as I need, based on previous experience. And I just rub it around with a spoon. Don't have to be too fancy, you just want to coat the surface of it. Like, you know, you've seen on pizzas on TV and in movies. Alright, a little bit more. We're at about half the jar now. More or less. We'll see. But I get the impression that that whole jar would be way more sauce than would be usable. I learned a lot of this working at various pizza delivery companies. Some of them good, some of them bad. No, strike that, all of them bad. But a couple of them had some actual decent pizza cooks there who had worked for real restaurants, and they taught me all this stuff that they weren't actually really allowed to do on the crappy pizzas we were delivering. One thing they always criticized me for was taking too long with the sauce, because you don't need to be this careful. I am way more careful than I need to be. And that, for a pizza this thin and this small, looks just about like the right amount of sauce. Maybe another spoonful, but half this jar is just about perfect. If you over sauce it, one thing, it'll burn your mouth when you bite into it. That sauce gets really, really hot. If you have a lot of it, it retains a surprisingly lot amount of heat. But you also don't want to break your pizza with sheer weight. So take it easy, kind of on everything. Biggest mistake I made when I first started making pizzas was to think that every pizza was a Chicago deep dish pizza that needed 400 pounds of ingredients. And that is not true. I actually like thinner, crispier pizzas, which is why I'm showing you how to make one. And for a thinner, crispier pizza, you have to be pretty conservative with the amount of stuff you put on it, just because the structural integrity of the crust gives way no matter how stiff it is. At best, you're going to have a really big, thin cracker, so just think about that. That's not going to hold a pound of meat. That is all we need to do to sauce it. Next, we're going to move on to actually putting on the rest of the ingredients. Right, remember that garlic we chopped up from before? This is the time it comes into play. You don't want to overdo it. Garlic can be pretty powerful stuff, and even if you love the flavor, as I do, you can easily overdo this. So that's why I cut these into razor thin little pieces. I try not to put too many. You just want to toss them in with the sauce there. They will bake into there. If it's really, really thin, they'll kind of dissolve away. And I'm teetering on the edge of too much garlic already. Look at that. Look at that. That's a lot of garlic. It's so much garlic. But I like enough garlic to kill vampires from miles and miles away. So we're going to put just a little bit more on. And right now, this is kind of human threshold garlic. This is beyond normal. Okay, stop there. Stop there. You might have a lot of garlic left over, but trust me, stop there. Don't do any more. You will thank me in the morning. Or if you fail to follow my instructions, you will curse yourself in the morning following eating this pizza if you put any more than that. Alright, now, at this stage, one really cool thing you can do if you have access to it is to take some fresh basil and to break it up and to put the little pieces into the sauce. It tastes wonderful. Unfortunately, I don't have access to fresh basil, so I'm taking dried basil, way too much, and I'm crushing it up in my fingers. Not nearly as good as fresh, but When it's all you've got, you gotta rock it. So that's that step. Alright, now it's time to put on the cheese. Just make sure you get a 6-ounce bag of mozzarella. That should be all you need to cover everything you need to cover. Might even be more than you need. I read online somewhere that they said 8 ounces of cheese was right. I'm going to dump this whole 6-ounce bag onto here, and you tell me if you think it needs more. Personally, I think that pretty well covers it. And when this melts down, it will cover this even better. Again, back when I first started making pizzas, I took the more is better to everything approach, and I ended up really over cheesing the pizza to the point where it would like run over the edges and not cook right, and also break the crust. So 6 ounces, 1 pizza, that's pretty much all you need. Next we put on the meat toppings. Alright, so now we're going to pepperoni the pizza, and it's pretty straightforward. You just put pepperoni on the pizza until you run out of space. At least that's my approach to it. Again, I do tend to overdo it, and the amount of pepperoni I have here might be twice as much as I need, and that's fine. That looks pretty solid. I'm going to leave it like that. Alright, next we're going to do the sausage. That lovely sausage we cooked from earlier, we're now going to crumble into the vacant spaces between the pepperoni. Protein in every bite. Now, if you're buying a pizza from one of the major chains, or pretty much anywhere really, you want to watch how many of the cured meats you put on there, because they're going to have a lot of extra sodium and a lot of nitrates, a lot of horrible things. I buy everything fresh and nitrate free so I can go nuts and do what I want. And we have plenty of sausage, but that looks like a pretty healthy amount to me. I don't think we need to do any more because we need to make room for some vegetables. So let me go rinse off my hands, and then we will come back and do some vegetables. Alright, now it's time to put on some vegetables. Kinda doesn't matter what style you choose, and you can make it look really attractive and spend a lot of time arranging it, or you can just toss stuff on there. It's up to you. I'm going to be a little finicky about this just because I am doing this for a video. So I'm going to try and make this look a little bit more aesthetically appealing than I might if I were just throwing it together for myself. But really, you don't have to be super careful. Alright, that's a pretty good start. Actually, I want to use a slightly thinner one here. Yeah, I'm that picky. Alright, now a few red ones, just for some color. I cut these as thin as ribbons, and then I kind of decorate them like ribbons. I don't know if that makes it any better flavor-wise, but it's easy for me to remember, and it's kind of fun to do. These little red doodles. And that's pretty good for that. Let's go ahead and add, on top of that, our more savory ingredients. We've got some onions. Da-da. And if you don't want that much onion on there, you can always just break these up into the little hoops. That's an option too. That's what I'm going to do to spread out the flavor. Again, I'm being kind of super picky and careful about all this. You don't have to go anywhere near so slow. You can just kind of throw stuff on there. As long as you're not trying to present this for a photo, it will taste the same, and you will be happier for having spent less time on it. And the last little thing, the shallots, or do you call them shallots? It's up to you. I've heard the last name shallot. I've heard people refer to the food as both shallot and shallot. Never been confident on the pronunciation of that word. But they are delicious, whatever they are. So I like to toss a couple on at the end, just for a slightly different flavor than you get from the onion. Not dramatically different, but it adds a sweet, savory component. Alright, that's probably as much as I should fuss with that. Which means, of course, I'm going to do just a little bit more. Alright. Next and final step is going to be a little bit of spice. Now for the final step, this is mostly aesthetic more than anything else, but I take a little bit of parsley, like that. A little bit more basil, or basil if you prefer. And I crush them up together. Just like that. Nothing too hard, nothing too fancy. And then I sprinkle it on the edge of the crust more than anything else, but also a little bit on top. And that is literally just to give it a spiced look. The parsley doesn't add a lot of flavor. It's already got a lot of basil flavoring throughout. So this is just to give it little dots on top that make it look more spicy. And that actually enhances the quality of it for some reason, because psychology is a big thing. So that's that. The other things I like to do, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Just a little bit of pepper. To be fancy, I'm using fresh ground pepper. Regular pepper will work. And then a little bit of salt. Really don't use much salt. Even though these meats are nitrate free and less preserved than most meats, they still have a lot of salt in them, and you don't need to add much. And that is that. All we need to do now is cook it. Alright, pizza fans, we are done. If you were following along, this is roughly what your pizza should look like at home. If it doesn't, you did something tragically wrong and it's not my fault. Seriously though, it should more or less look like this, and the taste is out of this world. It's savory, it's a little sweet, it's my favorite thing to eat. And I did not mean for that to rhyme when I started it, but it came out that way, so sorry if that sounded horrible. So, at the end of all this, you might be thinking to yourself, boy, this pizza looks nice, but I have a big pile of leftover onions and peppers and other ingredients that didn't fit on one pizza. Well, my advice to you is to make 4 pizzas at once. That's what I do. So I buy 4 pizza crusts. I buy, as you saw, one of those bottles of pizza sauce was more than I needed for one pizza. Took 2 bottles of pizza sauce to cover all of these pizzas. All of these pizzas were covered by just that one white onion, just that one red onion, just the one green pepper, and just the one red pepper. I used, I think, a quarter of a pound, maybe a half a pound of Italian sausage. I'll have to look that up. I think it was a half a pound, to be honest with you. That covered everything. And 3 packages of pepperoni was more than enough to get these things very, very pepperonied. If you look over here, these actually have way more pepperoni on them. So that's the way to do it, really. I cook one, and then I wrap these 3 up and freeze them, and then I get to have gourmet style, I'm giving it a lot of credit, but I get to have nice tasting pizzas that are better than the pizzas I buy at the grocery store for the next several weeks. So this is it. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. I hope you enjoy eating your pizza when you get to yours, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.